So I worked with the Bhopas to reinvent their stories. And this is a part on the freedom struggle of India, with 37 songs that were written, composed, and sung. And we went to about 20 villages performing in the evening. There's Nehruji, there's Maulana Azad, there's Patel, there's Sarojini Naidu and Subhash Bose as his quote, like this. But the question is, from here, where? What do we do with traditional skills? How does change get absorbed? How do we reinterpret it so that there's a future of our past?
Today we come to the concluding session of the 11th day of our outreach. It's been 10 years AHF has been working in the villages, and this year also we marked the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth. Since our work revolves around his philosophy and we are beginning a new innings, moving out of the space, we have a very interesting session which we are going to begin on shrinking of the media, shrinking of the space for culture in media. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Mr. Kenji Hiramatsu and Mrs. Patricia Hiramatsu. Mr. Kenji Hiramatsu is the ambassador of Japan, and we owe it to the Japanese Social Development Fund for having supported us for almost 10 years to work in the villages. Thank you, Ambassador. May I introduce the panelists? We have Mr. Manish Malhotra, India's leading designer and a youth icon. Mr. Anand Goenka. Mr. Anand Goenka, Executive Director of the Indian Express Group. Ms. Vrinda Gopinath, an eminent writer and an independent political journalist. Over to you, Vrinda.
Thank you. Anand, I'd like to begin with you. You have in the Indian Express, there's a daily talk page. Do you think it works well, or do you feel that you'd rather shut it down?
No, I mean, look, I would much prefer that we had not 26 pages a day, but 100 pages a day, right? Market realities are what they are. I think if you notice in all the mainstream news organizations, the amount of space given, culture, you rightly said, is reducing, has reduced significantly. I think, as at the Express, we've always tried to differentiate ourselves from being in the mainstream, yet differentiate ourselves from the mainstream. And I think that that's been a consistent strategy for the last 20 years. It's kind of worked for us. It allows us to not sell every newspaper at a loss. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but every time we sell a newspaper, we lose 5 rupees.
Yeah.
Right? So we're actually paying you to read the newspaper.
Yeah.
So if you take the pile of newspapers by the end of the year, you will get more from the Raddiwala than you paid for the subscription in the first place.
So how does the revenue work then?
So we said let's not go down that game because that's in our view, eventually if you look to the Western world, print will at some point be under challenge. It's not right now, but it will be at some point. So I think the only way to differentiate and to really outlast that, if the Express was to be around for another 85 years, I think just being this hyper commoditized content is not the way to do it. I think the idea is to really push the boundaries in terms of educating the reader and giving some content which nobody else really has. So I think arts and culture is one of those areas where where
so you'll do it differently?
We try to, of course. I mean, every time there's a fashion show, obviously, the most newspapers would appreciate or look for the showstopper. I think often, and I've always complained about this, but often the Express journalist will, forego the showstopper, but instead cover the fabric and and the structure. So we will, at least we do that almost annoyingly. Too often we do that, but so I think we try to do it differently. At least that's the attempt. I wish it sold, and I wish it was more in demand than it is. Okay. But I guess that's the reality of our market, and
But surprisingly, you said culture. You related it to fashion. Manish, would you say that fashion really gets an amazing coverage that it doesn't deserve?
Well, it's a wrong question to me, but I think that no, I think fashion deserves even more coverage. But I think that we have so much of social media today, which is covering so much. So at one level, when social media is progressive and it's covering so much, I also feel there is too much, you know, and I'm not so sure as we go ahead, how much are we going to observe, imbibe, or remember? You see a design today, you see another design tomorrow. You're following an actor, that actor's wearing a designer today, is speaking something else tomorrow, is wearing someone else tomorrow. So there is no, I just think this whole philosophy that's coming today in the youth, which is like instant, I'm not so sure what is the long-lasting effect. People today are opening up to it. So for example, I come from a very different world. My whole profile is very unique because I'm not trained in fashion, and I started with films because of my passion for films. And for years I just did costumes. And from costumes I came into mainstream, which was never heard of. And someone like me to get into, be interested in handloom or work on an NGO with Shabana Azmi. And today, you know, whenever I come to, you know, Rajiv's foundation and his studio here, I go back, you know, almost educated and more imbibed. And I always call him back and say, I'd love to collaborate. And even the clothes that I saw today, or the art I saw today, and all the craft that I saw today, I would love to bring that even in a store like mine, which basically sells dream and sells grandeur and glamour, you know. But I would love for that collaboration to happen. Maybe a couple of years ago, I wouldn't even think of it. But today I know.
What changed it? Exposure?
I think in a way media. I think media has been very helpful in that, and I think the youngsters of today, the millennials, they're very inspired. They're very interested. In a way, they are not interested. Their power of observation or you know, memory is very short. But if you get them interested, you know, they are, and there is a lot more knowledge. You see that even in films today. Films have taken such a big leap in the last 2 years, and the movies that have done well this year as well, commercial films, have been very different. So you have your typical commercial film, which will always do well, but there are a lot of other movies which you probably are not sure of, which have done extremely well. So I think it's definitely the youngsters and media and social media which is helping that.
Rajiv, are you happy with the way things are going?
No, I think
No, but just to make a point after what Manish said, I think you know, a large part. I mean, I think social media, very rightly as he said, technology, we've always used it as an enabler, especially in storytelling and in literature. Rajivji mentioned artificial intelligence randomly once in the middle of this conversation, but you know, I think by the end of next year, we wouldn't know an article that is written by a computer bot versus an article written by a human being, right? So if you look at any sports coverage, weather, stock market, it will all be written by computers in the next, it's already happening. And I think one of the things that
next year.
It's already happening. I mean, in the Western markets, it's, you know, you can't tell. So today I have the technology to write 2 different articles, both by algorithms. One for if Bombay and Delhi Devils plays Mumbai Indians, I can write 2 different articles from different point of view, and you target the Delhi audience, the Delhi, you know. So you can completely game this whole thing with technology. And I think one of the things where technology actually gets resisted is really when you have this kind of passionate storytelling, you know, that Rajivji was doing today when we're walking around through this, the love and passion with which he described each thing. You know, that's really what keeps the human being still
It becomes
still in the conversation.
Nourishing rather than just information.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So how do you see, where does the media come in now with in terms of culture? Let's get back to culture. I mean, how does mainstream media now get culture back into the space?
You know, I think
it there?
I think there's a lot more space for it, and I think we can do a lot more. But I think, you know, as Manish said, I think social media is really creating a very organic sort of a space where people who are interested are finding their own audience. The interest graph, the interest group of people, they sort of are connecting on their own really. So I think the authenticity of the content therefore is far more targeted, it's far more accurate because it's so organic, you know.
Let me give you an example of how mainstream media covers culture. We opened the Times of India website. It was
You can't actually defend Times of India.
Okay. No, it's there on Google. So it begins with Indian cultural values must be part of education is one article. Then you'll have Salim Khan says Love Yatri is a blend of entertainment and culture. The Indian Express will say Munawar's music, Notes of Peace. There's an article. Then there'll be a Kolkata Durga Puja Pandal pays tribute to sex workers, which is newsy. And Confessions of a Creative Mind by a Bangladeshi artist. My point is, it's just so diverse.
Yeah.
How does, you know, fashion is very...
Culture is diverse.
Yeah, so how do you bring it all together? I mean, you know, how do you draw a reader to what's happening in the city? Is it just listings? It would be reviews? What works?
Yeah, I think the review is an area that's kind of lost. You know, if you look at theatre, for instance, all the theatre reviews, all theatre coverage is largely paid for now. I mean, we don't do paid news at all, and that's sort of again a differentiator from the Express's perspective. But a lot of sort of telling you what theatre to watch is actually just sort of, you know, paid for. And so I think that is a huge opportunity. You know. If I come to a practical problem, the guys who are qualified to review theatre, you know, it's tough to retain them as just, you know, as just waiting for that that play to go and sort of cover and sort of review, because it's a very geographical, you know, issue. Expensive. If there was enough supply, you know, it could be justified. But if you've got one play which is worth reviewing a month, you know, in the city of Delhi, it just gets a little bit, you know, it's unsustainable really. But for instance, we print one of the largest newspapers sold in Bombay. It's called Lok Sakta. It's a Marathi newspaper. And so we dominate the space of the one-act play because Maharashtrians love theatre. So there we've got a 3-person team that covers theatre. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's a market led. So in Delhi, no, I can't say we have any theatre.
No, there is theatre of another kind, which you cover very well in the roundhouse, the circus. but I mean, I just want to comment that I think the word culture is pretty loaded. Field Marshal Goering felt like picking up a gun the moment he heard that word. And Gandhiji, since he's inspired what we're doing here, never used the word Sanskriti. It's to suggest to grow, it has right connotations, but he used the word Sabhyata, which is a civilizational process. So this clubbing things as culture and putting things which we think are culture, theatre, music, dance, is really limiting the sphere. I think it's like breathing. You can't stop breathing if the air is polluted. Culture is very much part of everything we do and has to be for us to be able to live. So I think that emphasis of a culture page has to change. It's another way of looking at culture, which is probably more
very
important.
interesting. Yeah, sure.
So you know, it's not about me. It's up close and interpersonal. I do time and constraints and bad planning, mostly bad planning. We put this two formidable people on. There were different subjects. Manish was up close and interpersonal, where I was hoping to get some real nice, juicy, gossipy things about what moves him, what makes the sap rise. But he's a chum, so he'll come again for sessions like this, I'm sure, and I can count on him. Anand, we were deeply privileged to really give us a point of view which has to be about the lack of seriousness to issues that concern us, and how do we make it more accessible, particularly to the youth. I think a lot of those questions that come in when you spoke about social media, and of course I'm alarmed to hear about the price of the newspaper and the cost of raddi. That's something I had no idea. So I would like to ask the question as to where is the money going to come from for the kind of work we are doing, because that is the subject indeed for one of the sessions. Ankush, sometimes very soon with Ila Bhatt and with Ashok Chatterjee and others, where is the money? Whether CSR can come up with it, whether corporate patronage, which I think is minuscule in this country, hasn't quite understood its role still. If you look at museums, ours is a private enterprise. It's just madness that made it happen. But Mexico City has 385 museums. Only 4 are in the private domain, in the government domain. The rest are all private. So that word culture, support for culture, museums is yet to happen. So that is something that we are going to take up later. I think on this occasion, because there is an audience of young people and others, could we, with your permission, could we sort of ask people to animate this more? Are there some burning issues that you've been waiting to ask Anand, or you've been waiting to ask Manish? This is your time. It'd be difficult to get them on stage, and certainly very difficult to get them together. So this was my improvisation and bad planning on our role.
Until I think of a question, can I ask you a question, Rajuji? And I've been sort of, I'm just so amazed at the Mumbai airport, and I mean from the bottom of my heart, because it's so rare to see public art like that, especially in a city like, an overcrowded city like Bombay. Manish, I'm sure you agree. The one thing I wanted to ask is that a lot of art seems to stem from sort of, free speech. A lot of it is an expression of free speech. And when you kind of, if you agree with that sort of basic sort of theory.
That's totally new perspective, but I'm riveted.
If you agree with, okay, so if it's a new perspective, then maybe you can argue that, but.
No, I'm riveted. I think it's.
Is government support the only way? Patronage the only way? Because this government has done actually a lot, right? We've got art in railways, we've got.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I think I shouldn't be looking at the gift house in the mouth, but there is no gift. And I do believe that often government patronage can be the kiss of death. I do believe mediocrity reigns supreme when there's less pehchan. And pehchan doesn't come for the asking. Certainly doesn't come with a few degrees. But having said that, I do not take the honors of the airport. I think if the honors really have to be given, and I don't mean this, I think they have to be given to Sanjay Reddy. I think Sanjay had a vision. He did not want Bombay to be Shanghai. He didn't want it to be Dubai. He wanted it to be a place where you could get a sense of who you are. That strength of vision is easier said than done. And then to give a free hand, free speech, and to say, speak whatever truth you have to power, requires courage, requires support, but singularly, it's still the person who has to pay the bills. And in that, I must say that I was lucky to inform him that in this country, and I don't know if the audience is aware, that there is a guideline that says 2% of all activity on building has to go towards arts and crafts. 2% of the building industry in this country, even if you were to say this guideline came in 1972, would be much, much more than all the government patronage, all the ministries that are touching culture, all their budgets put put together. So somewhere along the line, we really haven't touched what were put into the preamble of supporting culture. We have not touched this. This is 72. It was thought of in Nehru's time, but I think it was implemented later. But if we could even just implement official things and much more, the real support has to come from the audience. I think if you start, often young people when they're gathered here in the morning, students, they ask me, what do we do? And children have a way to get to the point straight away. So I said, well, maybe one day in a week, or I have to say what everybody says, you should think about what you're buying. Is it going to support somebody who you recognize, somebody whose quality of life needs to become better? When you go to the latest fast food joint, look around and see if there's somebody on the pavement, if it's clean, is making some nice bun tikki or para pao. Go for it. Go for the small. Go for those people who are trying to make their living from whatever they know. Respect that skill. So the pakora wala analogy has a lot of meaning for me. Unfortunately, when the Prime Minister said, there are people making pakoras, and he's tried to defend the fact that this means employment. My God, he was dead right. 95% of this country is self-employed. And making a pakora, I assure you, is no small joke. This is not being passed, but I think it should be passed, as we'll get cold here. Please eat what Dhan Singh, our cook, makes as a paper-thin pakora in Palak. I mean, you could make pakoras and pakoras and pakoras, and they could be all different. Everybody's hand could be different. So support that. Support something bespoke. Support something that makes from this marvelous instrument. Support something that comes up from the spirit of your entire body, interpersonal communication. Thank God for Maharashtra, the theatre still is alive. And thank God for your paper that has kept it there. But I think it's very important that interpersonal communication remains more than just pressing two buttons. It must be face to face too. We must not, they used to say that, Shakespeare, I think, that the whole of England was a nest of singing birds. It would be terrible that if you felt the need to sing, you just press a button or put on the radio. Everybody must sing, everybody must dance, everybody must make, and in making, doing, it's being. I didn't think I'd give a speech.
Manish, are you happy the way the fashion industry has exploded? Because it's one of the few sectors, unlike like art, for instance. There's a lot of private, art galleries and fair which took it away from government, from the Lalit Kala Academy and whatever. So has fashion. What do you think is required for craft and handicraft?
So, like I mentioned earlier, that I think in the last, say, about 3 years, there has been a movement and awareness which is really enhanced with media. And the awareness is, I can see the awareness in the customer and the client who's wanting to wear their old patolas or banarsis, or on their Mehndi day, they don't mind wearing something very handloom. It's come into the whole fashion space. In fact, recently, if you notice, a lot of the women that I see in the so-called airport looks has started wearing Indian clothes. And you see churidar kurtas, or you see the olden style big dupattas, all back. So I think that whole thing, wearing a handloom sari or wearing a crafted kurta, is also now considered fashionable, or for the millennials, cool. So I see a great future in that. And I see, as Rachi was speaking about how, it's in all over the world, a lot of the crafts are supported by private organizations and made into museums. I see that happening very soon here. I see people being more and more interested in what's around, what is that they can imbibe. Because there is, today everything is existing in a parallel. So there is a certain non-awareness and there is an awareness. There's certain non-interest and there's a lot of interest. So I think the what I see now, which is very exciting to me, is the coexistence of a young mind, a jaded mind who's now rethinking, and constantly that young energy which is restless, which their attention span is really of a few seconds, but yet is innovative, or yet is interested in old revivals. So whether I see a lot of future, and I see a lot happening with craft and handloom for the years to come.
So you were talking about a new project in, say, lifestyle or say interior decoration. Does Indian craft have space there, or is it only, will it only come if there's innovation?
Well, I think it should have
I want you to hold that question once, because you just used the idea of handloom and craft. You must repeat that question that you've done. But this might be the only way I can connect. Just as there's fake news, there's a huge world up there of fake handlooms and fake crafts. How do we tell the difference? I know that on this there's been a great amount of discussion on how to tell fake news. A lot of clinical, technical, moral, ethical issues. But on the issue that concerns us, Smriti Irani was here about a few months ago, and I picked up 100 pieces from all the government emporiums and brought them here with experts. Mohan Rao and all went with me, weavers, picking up from Khadi, from all the Baba Khadak Singh Marg emporiums, where the salesmen were even willing to sell us a label saying handmade in India, telling us this is a parloom का है, मशीन का बहुत अच्छा बना है, सख्त मजबूत है, ये लेबल भी चाहिए, अगर आपको बाहर ले जाना है तो ये लगा दो, इसमें लोग पसंद करेंगे. That's government emporiums. So it's so difficult for people who know, recognize that this is not handloom, this is parloom, that this is not khadi, this is straight from a machine. It's being sold in government emporiums, and the percentage now is almost 70%. This is the bad news. So how do we tell a fake from the real?
Well, I think that, like I mentioned, that there's such an awareness and there's youth and population and interest. But the flip side to that is there is a coexistence of fake. So for example, even for a designer, there are fakes being sold, like say half a kilometer away. Now, what there could be is, again, using social media to its benefit of getting awareness. How handloom and textile and crafts have really come to people's notice now, thanks to media. I think it will be again media that will step in to get that awareness of fake and real. But if you say that that won't exist, I don't think that's possible, because there will always be a coexistence. What we can do is aspire and inspire people to look at the originals by constantly speaking about it, educating it, getting people like you to speak a lot more than they do, and and get that awareness. But unfortunately, it will coexist.
So stay a step ahead.
Yes, stay a step ahead is the only way to be.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. There were so many deeply personal questions I had for you, up close, interpersonal. Has to happen
What, my
another
personal
day.
life?
Has to have, of course. No. I wanted to find about loneliness and creativity. I want to ask about things that
Do
I
I
know
look
you-
lonely to you?
It's not how you look, it's what you also told me. So I need to go explore those dimensions at another time. I'm sure it'll happen. We've given you a lot of time to think and ask. Your only chance, guys. We've filled in. Anyone here raising a hand? Who?
The man himself. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
We're talking about space for culture in media, and well, one of the objectives is to get a lot of publicity and promotion for cultural products and promote their sales and their positioning in all sorts of markets. We had a session here a few days ago which spoke of slow fashion and conscious consumption. Well, when you speak about increasing volumes of sales for cultural products, I believe one of the things which can protect cultural products, especially textiles, is an idea of slow fashion. How do you bring the two together when media at one hand we are asking you to give more space to culture, but also at the same time create a sense of inculcating conscious slow fashion, conscious consumption, even conscious entrepreneurship for that matter?
I'm quite challenged. I told you, I'm quite challenged in this space, and especially fashion. I mean, just looking at me, you can tell I'm not on fact. Like, so, but I think, I think a lot of these things, as I said, they have to be organic. I think gone are the days, and we all know that of sort of linear throwing it at the audience. Look, you have to know about this. You have to read about this. I mean, the truth is the ability of media to influence what everybody should be consuming or everybody should be reading. I think that is depleting. People are making their own choices, and we are quite cognizant of that. We're kind of aware of that. So really, I think it's brands, it's authenticity, it's the sources of exactly this, of movements of slow fashion. That I don't think can be from media. I think it has to be from fashion icons.
Well, I think for people to get more and more aware, we have to reposition. Invention is one thing of the product, but even the language has to be of what they would imbibe and take on to. I mean, if I speak about heritage and culture today to the young, they're interested if I'm speaking it to them in their language. But if I'm coming across as being very, sorry to use the terms educational or giving them a lecture, they're not interested. You've lost their interest. They've gone on to some kind of a scandal that they're seeing. They're not scandals are every minute by the minute, right? So they have already gone on to that. So I think that to get them aware and interested, it has to be innovatively said to them and positioned.
A little while. So we've long extended your stay here. I know you had other appointments, but as you leave from this place that has supported our dreams for 20 years, please thank your people for better part of those 20 years has been because of the Japanese. We have to thank you from the bottom of our heart that you were able to come here. Thank you ever so much. Thank you. And before you leave, I want to introduce you to Himanshu. Himanshu here is the one who is the chief lead on the textile front. He wasn't there before, but I want you to meet him. And Manish and Anand, I'll introduce you later. You would prompt, and I'll just wrap this. Thank you. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you. Thank you.
Telling people what to see and what to do. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think about trends and about sort of what to expect, what sort of where the wind's really blowing. And I think that's, the idea of, instead of just profiling the sort of the veterans of the industry, really, if we can travel to the areas that, of the places that have all been showcased here so beautifully, we can actually travel there and we can share literally the stories that are being told through art. Because I think, as Rajuji rightly said, it's actually at the end of the day, it's all storytelling. So if we can share those stories, I think I'd be quite happy if we could do that.
Well,
That's one.
so would you see it only in print, or what's the future? How do you kind of make it more accessible?
We've so as a group, we're doing 130 million uniques a month. Right? So it makes us one of the largest news media companies, digital news media companies in the world. So between the Times of India, NDTV and us, no surprise, but these are three largest in the country. And no surprise in the world also, especially after Geo's immense population. And I think, it's so heartening to me that it's not always the lowest common denominator of content that is the most read article of the day. Increasingly, you're getting, the intellectual stuff, the offbeat stuff that's getting widely shared. So this piece that you mentioned about, I think it was a video that we did from the Indian Express Bangla website. So we had sent a team to actually talk about, it's a small village and they make masks for theatre. So it was a video piece about sort of those masks. I think it did some like 4 million views in 24 hours. And and the whole voice was in Bangla. So nobody cared about what the subjects were saying. It was just the visuals of those masks that were so powerful that it got so shared, so.
So it beats the Manish Malhotra Instagram there.
That I don't think I can ever compete with. I got married about a year ago. My wife is here, and I can just, the amount of the hours a day she spends on Instagram when she went after she was shopping for her bridal clothing, and since then even she's addicted almost. I think I can never compete with that. I don't think.
Manish, what is the fabric of the future? If it was khadi that kind of reigned at one time, what do you think is the Indian fabric of the future?
Well, I think the Indian fabric is going to be coexisting, it's not just going to be one kind of a fabric. And that diversification and that complete large mindset and acceptance that people are having today as people for one another, for culture, for fabric, tradition mixed with modernity, being yourself, from endogenous to everything. So I would really want it to be very diversified in terms of fabrics as well, and not just one, kind of a pattern. And I think it's so important. So I'll tell you, when the consumer is coming to me, the first thing is glamour. Their first thing is shimmer. Their first thing is chiffon. Now when I actually do take up a cotton, that collection never does well. Because it's kind of, they say, but this so others are doing. We come to you for that. So today there's a lot of, because there's so much of knowledge and so much of awareness, they are making their mind. I want to see this film. I like this person. I want to wear this outfit. For this function, I want to go to this designer and all that. But I think the next step, which I would like to do, I'm turning 52. It's only 13 years to my label. My business is much younger than I am. But my profession of costumes is almost as old as I am. It's 28 years in terms of existence. So, but the thing is that I feel like today changing that and saying, no, don't just look at me like that. I want to do many things. They might not be successful, but I want to be out there to try them out and change that mindset of the client who's only looking at me at one direction. So I think that coexistence and that diversified look, and in terms of fabric, embroidery, cut, creativity, is the future.
Any example?
Coexistence, for sure.
For example, I mean, if there's something.
For example, like, so a little
What's
thing
exciting you today?
No, many things exciting me. I love to work.
No,
for me, I think what is exciting is challenges that I would like to, like I said, try different things. And just the other day, I was having a meeting with my design team, and I was saying, you know what? It's been 5 years to our Delhi store. Everything is done so well. We're extending our business. Now, can we just leave what all we've done? And let's take that chance. It might do well, it might not do well, but that risk I'm willing to take. I can take it with my life. And I want to do things that probably I would have not touched maybe even 3 years ago. I would be too scared to, because I would feel the numbers of the turnover would fall, or people would not open up to it. But today I'm ready to do it. So for example, I think my friend Shabana has a huge influence on me on that, because I love the way she has a complete, like she's doing a play, then she's doing some English film, then she's doing some Hindi film, she's interested in music, she's friends with Rajiv, she's friends with Manish, and we are quite different. We represent an absolutely contrasting aspect of culture, clothes, all of that. So when they think of me, they think of a chiffon sari or a Bollywood actress. In fact, people think that Bollywood actors live in my house, but that's not true. So while all the designers today are running to dress film actors, and they do, but when it comes to Bollywood, it's my name. And actually maybe they're dressing Bollywood actors even more than I am. And I'm actually selling clothes more. But it's what people conceive and they stick to. And I think that is something that we all should now change and shuffle and make it interesting for all of us.
It's happening a lot in the industry already?
Well, I think there's a lot of awareness, and so it's a little mindset which you have to change. The good part, I think, is that while there is a mindset which is fixed, I'm sure it's also open to change. like, I think the youngsters really know what they want. So earlier when a bride came to you, she came with her mother, mother-in-law, bhabhi, 100 relatives came, and in-law said something for that one lehenga which is 5 lakhs, and there are 50 discussions on it. So the sister-in-law saying something, the mother-in-law saying something, all of that. But today, when the bride comes to you, she does come with all those people, but believe me, they're all quiet. It's
what
just the bride who's
Is that what
talking.
happened to you?
And
I was smart enough not to be part of that gang in the show.
or it's sometimes even the bridegroom is quiet, and the bride's talking about his life, and I keep looking at the guy and saying, "Speak up." So, but the good thing is the bride knows what she wants, and today I don't even think the mother-in-law gets into it. She's like, "You're happy, fine. What about my own outfit?" I love that. I love that change. I think even the mother-in-laws are enjoying themselves because they're all young mothers. They also today every bride says, "This dress is too heavy. At 1 o'clock, make me a plain skirt because I'm getting out of this outfit." Or remove the can of, "I'm taking my sneakers. I'm parting." I think that's great. She doesn't want to wear that outfit after 1 o'clock. She wants to wear something lighter. She wants her sneakers. She wants to party. She wants to enjoy her
That's
wedding
the new
as
look
much.
now.
And I think that's great. It's absolutely great.
Anand, you were saying that. No, you were saying that even a Bangladeshi mask maker can get 4 million hits. What is the future of? Is it lifestyle? Is it culture? I'm sorry, art. How does the media take it forward? How does it reach the new
I
audience?
think there's no. I think there's no shortcut to reporters that are curious, that are hungry, that are actually pounding the streets and that are going outside of their, the 4-5 zip codes that they live around or their offices around. And I think a lot of what journalism has come down to is there is a lot of laziness in our industry, and I think that a few successful examples like this Bangla sort of mask thing. It inspired people in our own newsroom to say, hey, can we pitch something a little bit more offbeat? Can we pitch something that we pitched 12 years ago that was shot down? But maybe now, there is sort of an interest again. So I think, it's just that feet on street, that hungry reporter. I think we've just, the whole, if you look at television news, for instance, it's all moved into a studio. How many TV channels actually have got 400 reporters, with cameras going all over the city? Very few. It's now more studio oriented because it's just so much easier to do that, and it's so much cheaper.
Is your website driving this whole kind of rush?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I can't give more than a page to culture, whatever that is, right, in the newspaper. But on digital, we publish as a group 1,500 stories a day. So we have the space for that.
It's really not about journalese. It's not about space again for culture. I recall Arun, who's a dear old friend, and he used to be here. I remember when Mandal agitation was at its peak. I said, Arun, I've just read so many pages of what your journalists and your politicians and all think of what this is. And I went out to little colonies of sculptors who were being commissioned to make Ambedkar statues. And I was amazed to see that there's a burst of business in their place. Then I went further to see where are these going. And this led me to little corners in every city that had been taken over, Dalit politics also, saying let's put it here, claim it. So through a sculpture story, you were telling a story on mainstream politics, but in a prism that doesn't just let journalism stop where it does. So when I say culture or civilization, we talk about writing in such a way that culture becomes intrinsic and not a separate page.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that curiosity also for that for the cultural ear and you know the culturally tuned ear or the sensitive eye is something that has to again come from it has to come from the ground. I was asking about government patronage. I just learned recently that in France you get government grants for quite easily for artists. Not easily, but I mean they give out a fair amount of grants.
Yeah.
But the only condition is that there has to be a piece of public artwork in every school that you have been given a grant for.
Yeah.
So I mean I think
Yeah.
something
No,
like
there is.
that.
I said that, but I wish you were here when Bibek de Beroy was sitting on your chair and telling me what government can give and what can't. I wish I will, that's another discussion. But I think time has come because I know that there is food and that cannot go cold. And the theme of the food is innovation. A word that again permits me to connect our two formidable guests. Innovation is about keeping ahead. And I can't thank you enough, Anand, Manish, to listen to, to pick up my phone. That's a big thing. And I hope that this is a farewell to South Extension, but many hellos to where we are going in Mehrauli, where it'll be always a home to creativity, I hope.
Rajiv, we always pick up your phones, but after Mehrauli, I hope you also do.
No. So, Brinda, many thanks for saving my skin yesterday when I was worried. I said, how is this going to happen? So thank you, all of you again. It's too late for burning issues. None of you raised your hands. Too late. I have to get the guests to go and to bring the food on the tables. So please stay and do some pet puja. And once again, our guests deserve more than an applause.